Spinning. I guess we're live. Okay. Hi. Can Are you still there, Lorea? Or can I hear you?
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, good. Cool.
Okay, great.
All right. So this is Veterinarians United, and what we're doing here is we are making this group to discuss various issues in veterinary medicine. And today we will be discussing terminal labs in veterinary school. And I was fortunate enough to go to UC Davis, where they are still doing terminal labs, but I didn't have to participate in any of them. Unfortunately, I chose not to take one class that I really wanted to take, which was large animal, or I guess it was livestock surgery, farmed animal surgery, because it was a terminal lab. So I missed out on that. UC Davis was known as like the school that got rid of its terminal laboratory program, but it still does this one lab where they take pigs with hernias, fix the hernias, and then kill them afterwards for some reason. They also do a variety of surgeries on these bull calves and then kill them afterwards. And they still do that to this day. Which is really disturbing. So we'll discuss other schools and what they do. Lorea is here. We will not mention what school she goes to, but tell me about yourself, Lorea. What do you want to say? What year you are? And
Yeah.
did
So
they?
I'm a third year, which means that I'm in that year where we get to do surgery. And I'm fortunate that the required surgeries at my school are no longer terminal. In the past, they were terminal surgeries done on shelter dogs that had multiple surgeries done, recovered, a surgery, recovered a surgery, and then were euthanized. That has long since been changed. And we have a really great program now where all third year students participate in, we don't even call it surgery block anymore. We call it spay block because our main goal is by the end of this spay block, you spay a shelter dog that then gets adopted. But we do have a terminal lab that I also is very similar to you, where I wish that I did take the class. It's happening this semester, but it involves a terminal surgery on a goat. So the goats are, they say the goats are diverted from being slaughtered. So they're diverted from the food stream, brought to my school, and then they have an abdominal surgery performed and then are euthanized before they are recovered. And I chose not to take that lab, even though I am really interested in surgery. Surgery is probably the area that I most want to focus. I want to become a shelter vet. So that's going to be a really big part of my day-to-day. And in retrospect, I wish that I had signed up for the class and then figured out a way to get all of the other experiences except for that terminal surgery. And maybe I would have had just had a better understanding of why they think that's still necessary and could have modeled a way to complete that course without the terminal surgery. But I was initially just really off put, like so many of my classmates, that I just didn't want anything to do with that class because I didn't want to be involved in a class that included a terminal lab. But yeah, in retrospect, I kind of wish that I had been involved in the course just so that I could have maybe shown that there was an alternative way.
Yeah, and we had in our class, or in our actually it was fourth year rotation. We had this rotation through the barn where we would actually do surgery on animals who needed it. I did a castration on llama and alpaca and I think potbelly pig, some mules. So these were client-owned animals, but we had our residents watching over our shoulder, making sure we did everything correctly. And we got to see our patients wake up from surgery and manage them post-op, because managing their pain and informing their person like how to take care of them after surgery, that's kind of the most important and difficult part, making sure they wake up, especially a large animal, wake up from surgery well and don't hurt themselves. And you're really missing out on that when it's just, oh, practice on an animal who will be killed. If you're just doing that once, you're pretty much wasting the life of an animal for not very good reasons. Like, you cannot learn how to do surgery on just from one time. You need to practice it over and over again. And there's a lot to it that's more than just the technical part of touching a bleeding animal, which is, I've gotten public records from all of the schools and what they do at each school and their reasons why they continue to do these labs that require animals to be killed. And their justification is always something along the lines of the students need to practice on bleeding tissue, and it's like, you can do that on an animal who will live. Or they say, we don't want students to practice on client-owned animals because of the liability of that. Well, other schools are doing this and having students practice on client-owned animals, and it's not a problem. And with the resident right there, and there's so many people who don't have access to veterinary care who are just happy to get it done. And there are so many farmed animals who need care and surgery. There's not enough farmed animal vets. And when you do this, when a school has this curriculum where they're forcing students to either decide, oh, I don't want to ethically take part in that, or I have some qualms about this doesn't feel good, I'm going to do it anyway. Like, that's really putting somebody in a morally compromising position that doesn't need to be there. So,
yeah, you bring up so many points that I've heard over and over. I was having a discussion with someone at the school about that, and they're kind of bringing up the point of that, there's nothing that beats being able to practice on live tissue. And it's just funny to me because as part of our curriculum, we've already done that. Everyone participates in the spay. And then we're also all required to complete a 2-week shelter rotation. And I was talking to a fourth year during that rotation. She had high, she was very skilled and confident in her skills, but during those 2 weeks, she did over 30 surgeries. Mm-hmm. And that's a requirement that every student has. So I don't understand why this one surgery has to be defended so much by the school. Another interesting point about it at my school is, even if I had signed up for the course, there's a really good chance that I wouldn't have gotten into it, because I think it caps around 20 or 25 students. And we have about 140 students in our class. So if it's such a good experience, then shouldn't it be something that all students are participating in?
Yeah.
Because we're all expected to graduate at the same level of proficiency, or at least at an acceptable level of proficiency. We're all going to be a little bit, right at that or above that in varying degrees. And I think there is a little bit of responsibility that we have to take onto ourselves as future surgeons if we feel like our curriculum is not giving us all the experience. Because the spay is a spay on a dog, so you're not getting to see what the skin of a goat or a cow or a horse, which is a lot different. And same with, you have a shelter rotation where you do 30 or 40 surgeries, but if you really want these other experiences, there's a way to get them. I haven't done my surgery block, and I've already done 30 spays and neuters over the last year because I went out to shelters. I went to other clinics that worked with rescues where I could get this additional experience on live tissue on animals who needed procedures done. So I just feel like the argument is not there for why it's such a valuable educational tool, because it's not something that the entire school or the entire class is being able to do. And it's just one out of, 10, 20, 30 that we are all required to do by the time we graduate anyway.
Yeah. Wow. Like it sounds like your school maybe in some ways is a little bit better than Davis, because we didn't have that 2-week mandatory shelter rotation where we got to do all the spays and neuters. We had to go out and seek that for ourselves, which I did. I was like every weekend going to the SPCA and spaying and neutering because I loved it. But there are some students who just don't like surgery, and like thank God for them, because I don't like talking to people. So like I always wanted this like dynamic duo, like Penn and Teller situation, where like I am the quiet one who just does the thing and you can talk to the people. So we all have our different skills, and that's how vet school is set up too. Like there are classes that are smaller that at least in our school we could track. I was equine and small animal. So I don't know. Are you like a tracking school? No, but
No, we
there
don't
are
track at all.
though. Yeah.
Yeah.
But obviously that there's a lot
interesting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
This was an elective class because only a certain number of people are allowed in it. So
yeah,
it's overflowing, or people are like, oh darn, I wanted to get into that class that I couldn't get in.
Probably I know the class is usually capped, or like there's not less than the maximum number in the class. So there are people who signed up for it who did not get into it, or like ranked it to who didn't get into it. And there's a lot in that class that isn't just this terminal lab that is probably really valuable. There's something that's really cool about my school is we have a like clinical simulation lab. And so we have cadavers, we have models, we have like so many more learning opportunities, even than I think the average vet school, to learn surgical skills that don't require a terminal ending.
Yeah. That sounds really cool, because we didn't have that, I don't think. But of course, I graduated a long time ago.
Yeah. And we do have some courses. I just had a lab where we were doing like physical and like reproduction exams on dogs, but they were client-owned dogs, and they just signed. We had to go through some extra training to make sure that we were following their the IUCOOK protocols. Like we had to watch a bunch of videos and like had to prove that we were competent in those skills before doing them on client-owned dogs. But we already do have a system in place for some. I mean, it's on a very small scale. I think there were 4 dogs per lab, and there were 3 labs. But it's something that the school's already doing, where they're offering a service that is being done by students at a lower price. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what the hang up is. So it's something that I've been pretty active about, talking with other students, talking with different committees, talking with the administration and different faculty members to try to get to the root of why this lab still exists and when it might go away soon. And I've actually been overwhelmingly surprised that the majority of the people who I've talked to on the faculty and admin side of things, they say this comes up every couple of years, or every year someone brings it up, and that the majority of them would be okay if the lab was, they're very careful with their words, but the general message is that they would be okay to see this lab not having a terminal component anymore.
Yeah. And they would be happy not seeing this lab not having a terminal are you talking about the deans or the
different professors, including professors who've been involved in it, different professors who just, they're not in that department and they just know it exists and they kind of hear about it. And just through conversations with faculty.
And I think that like the reason that these things don't change is because it's been happening for years and people are worried, what are the unintended consequences if we change it? And it takes a lot of effort to develop a new curriculum and new systems and write a new IACUC protocol. But if there's like enough pressure, enough agitation, then it makes it worthwhile for them. And a lot of schooling is just really outdated in a lot of ways. It's not just in the animal killing ways, in so many different ways. And it's time that we really agitate and inspire some change in veterinary curriculum in so many different ways. And I was, just thinking about like, why do we depend on people, experts from that region, or having to bring in the best people to a specific area to teach veterinary students? And it's good like that. It's not just one system where all the vet students in the country learn from just a few people, because we want some diversity of perspectives. Veterinary medicine is already culty enough. Like, thankfully, there's some differences in each school. But at the same time, some areas don't have access to the best person to teach this particular thing. And it's not always the most inspiring teacher. How do we get the students access to the best curriculum, the fastest way of instilling information into their brain? And some students miss out because they go to that school and they don't learn what students at another school are learning in the best way possible. So there's just so many things we need to rethink about how we teach students, not just in veterinary school, in general too. So
yeah, I mean, I can get on board with that as you're
a teacher
myself, and I have a master's in teaching science. I have a big passion for the way everything is taught, but especially science is taught, and how to make it approachable and engaging and effective. And it is really interesting going through vet school. Having been a teacher, I've taught at different levels. My training was in secondary education. I taught some college. I've helped start schools. I've created programs, and it's very interesting coming to a vet school and trying to approach some of these issues. I'm fairly active on as a student on the curriculum committee, and sometimes I feel like I'm met with the attitude of like, you don't understand how difficult it is to create a school program. And I'm like, I've done, I've not done it at the vet school level, but I think, sometimes I feel like I'm an outsider looking in, or like an insider, an educator, like, as assessing all of these different things, and how I think there's a few things to your point. I think if we want students to have educational opportunities based on, the best school or like best aligned with their goals, vet school has to be more affordable, because the majority of us pick our schools based on our in-state option. That's how I picked my school. There's so many schools that I would have preferred to go to based on my interests and background. But that's just not a reality for the majority of students. And then, we are really fortunate at my school. We have a teaching hospital, and so we do attract some really talented and dedicated clinicians. But for a lot of them, teaching is 50 minutes out of their day, maybe 3 days a week. And some of them are really dedicated educators who really care about pedagogy and how to convey the information. And some of them they're really passionate clinicians, and they are going to share what they know. And, we're 50 minutes of their day. So it's trying to find the balance of, not only attracting talented veterinarians, but talented teachers. And I think that Venn diagram is, not very big.
Yeah. I mean, it's already a small profession as it is. And then people have to take a pay cut in order to teach. And you have to like to do that. And a lot of veterinarians are introverts as it is and don't like teaching. So yeah, you have a very small group of people who are wanting to teach and who have the skills and the advanced degrees needed to teach too. Like you have to usually get an extra board certification in something if you're going to be considered as a teacher. Although there are some teachers who aren't, some instructors who are just regular DVMs who.
Yeah, it's interesting how the system maybe skews the people who end up at universities. I have a lot of professors who ended up at universities because they love teaching. But I wonder if the vets who really love teaching are the ones who are still out in practice, because they're the ones who are teaching on a daily basis when they're interacting with clients.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think of the great Michelle Forbes, if you follow her on social media. She's like, I don't know how she does it. She seems like if I lived near her and my dog was sick, I would just go to her. She seems so good and so compassionate and has such a great team. And I'm sure Aaron too. Aaron's, people.
Yeah, Aaron's in the house.
Aaron's we've been ignoring Aaron the whole time.
No, Aaron, I'm listening and enjoying your banter.
Can you tell us about your vet school experience without naming names of the school?
Yeah. I went to vet school in the dark ages, long time ago. I graduated in 1990, and I did not even realize going into vet school that we would be asked to do some terminal labs. It was like, what? So there was a bit of a disillusionment on a few levels of going into. I think I went into it kind of naively. Everything from how food animals are raised to the things, so the first lab that we were asked to do was in cardiology. And it was to take, a healthy dog and induce a cardiac emergency, and then bring the dog back to life, and then induce another one, and then bring it back to life another way, and then euthanize them. And there were actually several people in my class that were like, oh, what? Oh, we don't want to do that. But a few of us did stand our ground. We were threatened with, having a lower grade or whatever. It's like, okay, whatever. I mean, it was really, really upsetting. I just remember feeling, kind of for the first time in my life that, wow, like there is an huge ethical issue right in front of me, and I got to make a decision. And, it was like, it felt like a no-brainer to make the decision to not kill the dog. But there, at that time, in my life, and being, young and just wanting to, get my degree and help animals and all that. It was very, it was kind of scary. It was kind of you can kind of feel your heart beating and your palms getting sweaty, and you're like, no, I'm not doing that. So luckily there were a couple of other classmates that also refused to do it, and that was helpful. And then when it came to our junior year, another student from my class and I, plus we were able to combine because there was a student in the class behind us that also did not want to participate in the terminal surgeries. And we were supposed to do, actually, you would do a few in the course of that, where you would take a healthy dog, do a surgery, wake them up, recover them.
Are these from the shelter?
Not, yes, usually from the shelter or relinquished. Yeah, yeah. Because you would get all different breeds, and it was definitely not like from a breeding facility or something. And then you'd wake them up and take care of them for 2 weeks, and you'd do another surgery and put them to sleep. And I just thought, wow. And so kind of
What year was this? This was
this would have been in 1988.
Okay.
The 88, 89 school year. And so we stuck to our guns. We had several meetings with administrators and instructors, and luckily we did not have to drop out of school. That was suggested, that we go to another school, we go to another country.
To this day, students are told, like, this might not be the right thing for you.
Yeah, because we did not want to kill healthy animals. I mean, wow.
It's like, no,
like, that's the exact kind of vet you
follow
want.
the veterinary oath and the 3 R's. It's such gaslighting, and I'm so angry.
Yeah, there's quite the inherent contradictions there, but we were able to escape with our without having to do that. But the good thing is, we were very fortunate in that we did have an instructor and a clinician that was like, you know what, if we're going to do this, let's do that. Let's make it better. We're missing this and this and this. Let's create systems where we can learn those skills better. And so it was great. I ended up graduating late. I got a lot of pushback from classmates that wanted a special designation on my diploma that said I'd never learned surgery, which is ridiculous, but because
their derogation.
Yeah, do good or derogation. And just a lot of fear of, but this is the way it's done. This is the way it's done. And so it's interesting to still see so much of that mindset, I guess. But I know there's different ways things can be done. You got to get creative, and I think it's so important that we honor everyone's, the path of students that are like, enough.
Mm-hmm.
It's enough. And not just students, veterinarians. I know so many graduate veterinarians that even if they went along with those when they were in school, are like, oh, heck no, we shouldn't be doing that anymore. And you get out, and you if you want to learn something, you get in a situation where you expose yourself and you learn it, like Lorraine, you going into shelters, and so we do need to train people very well in veterinary school, but I just don't see the value in having a terminal lab or terminal surgery situation.
In my school, we had this mantra, because there's so many cult-like thoughts, stopping cliches in school, but this one was a good one. And it was, if you can do a dog spay, you can do any surgery. Like, So, because you've learned all the basic skills, how to ligate, how to
You
suture,
do.
how to.
You do. And when you're first doing dog space, you're actually seeing quite a bit of what's in there because you're not doing little keyhole incisions.
Nope,
No.
you
You're,
have to do
you
the
know,
whole thing.
you do the whole thing. And, so you kind of get a mini exploratory in there. You see where the organs are placed. You see the omentum and the vessels. So yeah, and I did not feel that I suffered at all from lack of education. I felt like I got a really good, solid education. And I think my first year out, I did a splenectomy, a cystotomy, an intestinal anastomosis.
Wow.
And then you went on to do, some orthopedic surgeries, things that a lot of vets now aren't even doing. They just refer out.
Because they're so
Because
worried.
everybody's so special. Well, everybody's so specialized too, and there's all these, just people that are just surgeons, and it's just a very different world in a lot of ways. Back then we didn't have the option to refer, and we didn't have as many specialists available, and so we just, and we were developing X-rays in tanks by dipping film. So,
I grew up in that era too. I remember I worked in a vet hospital where we had to dip film.
Don't open the door while you're developing X-rays.
No, don't open the
So
door.
see how far we've come.
Leave the X-ray film cabinet open and then open the door and then ruin all your X-ray.
Ruin them all. Yeah. But so I'm very, very encouraged by how many students and how many veterinarians are, think of it differently now than back then. And it's, change is hard for some people. There's different personalities that they just don't do well with change, and they don't. And once it's done, it's a lot less painful. But
we're scientists. Like,
we're
we should
scientists,
be looking at the science and
we're
evolving.
innovators. And we're problem solvers. That's what we do every day in veterinary medicine. Is we figure out how to get things done. What's that? We can do hard things. Well, let's do this hard thing. It's not, it's doable.
So what percentage of your class, Erin, was male versus female versus non-binary folks?
If anybody was non-binary back then, nobody knew. So I can't answer that. It was actually over 50% female at that time still.
Over 50%.
Yeah, it was trending towards more women. Honestly, I'd have to look it up because I'm not sure if I remember, but it was, I would say it was half or more female.
Okay. And what about your class, Thoria? What is it?
It's probably 70-30, maybe even more female to male, and with a handful of, I know at least 2 or 3 non-binary folks as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think my class was similar. But yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, this is a historically white male profession. Now we're seeing this demographic change that happened in the 80s, but we still have curriculum that's left over from back in the day.
Yeah.
And I think, thankfully, women have voiced concerns about this. And I see this a lot with the wildlife field. It's a predominantly male-dominated field. They still do a lot of outdated things like treeing panthers and darting them, treeing them with hounds, darting them. And then you have like the one woman comes on board and says like, there's a better way to do this, guys. You don't need to shoot a treed panther. And she gets a lot of pushback and backlash and ultimately probably gets fired or kicked out but
or goes to vet school, because that's what happened to me. I mean, it wasn't that exact thing, but I wasn't the little kid who said that they wanted to be a vet, I was the little kid who said I was going to grow up and save the tigers. And so I studied wildlife, and I worked as a wildlife biologist. I had a lot of different field jobs. And one of my favorite jobs was I actually, and was kind of when I was like, oh, I want to work more with individuals, because it had all been about the population and endangered species before that. And that was like my main focus. And then I got a job as a conservation scent detection dog handler.
Ooh.
And so, and I have one of my former coworkers has since retired, and now he lives with me. He's a 12-year-old German Shepherd. And anyway, so I would handle these dogs, and we would traipse around, really intense terrain. And they were trained in scat. And then we had one project in Michigan where they were trained on fawn remains. And it was part of this predator prey project where they were trying to quantify the amount of fawns and try to estimate the predation of the wolves and bear and coyotes and bobcat on the fawns. And so through that, I got to be a part of several carnivore captures. I got to be a part of some wolf captures and some bear captures. And it really opened my eyes because, like I said, I grew up saying I was going to save the tigers. And so I was really focused on the carnivore track. And I really wanted to be like a carnivore conservationist. And I was just really, I don't know, I was really upset by some of the field methods, and they're very standard field methods. The way that the wolves and coyotes were trapped were that they were trapped in traps, like foot traps that, they were rubber instead of like teeth, like trappers would use.
And I've seen the YouTube videos, because I looked this. I'm like, what? They're still trapping these guys, and the guy puts his hand in it and it snaps. He's like, it doesn't hurt,
but the distress. So the biologists would go around and drive and check the traps all the time. And we would get a call like, oh, we have a wolf in a trap. And then we'd all run there as fast as we could to, so that we could, dart the wolf, collar it, and let it go. And they would drag the trap. Like, they're just the amount of time they're in a trap, even if it's 20 minutes is too long. And they're so distressed.
Yeah.
And then you are darting them with, ketamine, and there's no veterinarian on site. It's all biologists who have some training, but I took a wildlife capture course, and it was a really good course, but it was nothing to get you prepared for like a veterinary emergency or something. And
like cardiac arrest under ketamine. Like, do you know how to? Do they have epinephrine in case somebody, arrests or oxygen?
No, I mean, it's just considered a loss in the project, and they probably have to report it. And, we didn't have that happen, but
Good.
I knew someone who worked on a cougar project who did have a cougar that they treat it, and it fell out of the tree and broke its neck. And, he stopped doing cougar work after that. And we worked on this project together. And
did they free that cougar with hounds or?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And anyway, so this wolf, and then, part of the physical exam is to, look and treat the injuries that were inflicted by the harmless trap. And then, we draw blood, we do all of that. And then we wake them up, and, they're just so disoriented and so scared and terrified. And it's the middle of summer. We're like, spraying their belly with alcohol to cool them down, which
now we know water
it was
cool them down with alcohol.
Yeah. And like ice, ice packs. And And then for the bears, a routine thing is you take out one of their premolars, and that's used to age the bear. And so they're just like digging that tooth out, you
That's
know, like basically with like a curette.
yeah.
And yeah, I did a couple of those captures and was involved in a couple of them. And
How did they capture the bears? Is it with a leg trap too, or with something
no,
else?
culvert trap. Yeah.
Okay.
And like this was a project that was done really well. Like the people who were trained they had gone through the same capture program that I went through. Like their images from their study are part of that like that program. And you know, like they were taught by someone who I really respect, who like really cares about animal welfare, and like this is the standard of wildlife medicine.
Yeah.
Or not medicine, of wildlife capture. And that's when I stopped working in the field and stopped pursuing carnivore work.
Like,
And
this is the best they can do. No, thank you.
well, and it just planted the seeds for, you know, I thought about, should I get a PhD in like carnivore human conflict, or like how can I, and I ultimately landed on becoming a vet, because the vet is still the one who writes the script for that ketamine and is the one who's reviewing the protocols. And you know, that's what I hope to be able to do, is to be able to impact like the way that wildlife are treated for research that probably doesn't even need to be done in the first place.
Yeah. So is there a reason why they can't use big, like the bear traps, but smaller for the wolves? And
Just behavior. I don't think wolves will go in a tunnel like that.
I don't know. Like if they put meat in there, like I just think of like feral cat traps, or
Yeah.
would panthers go in traps like that?
Yeah, because they do catch things. Yeah, I don't know. Actually, I don't know if I'm just parroting, you know, what I think, because I think a lot of you know, you guys had brought up veterinarians or scientists, but I also think veterinary medicine is really steeped in a lot of tradition.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I think wildlife is the same. You know, I think in the veterinary side, it's farming culture, farming tradition, and in the wildlife side, it's hunting and trapping tradition, because you know, for a long time, those were the people who, you know, were turned to as the experts, because those are the people who are spending the most time with their respective species. And I think there is a lot to learn from hunters and trappers about behavior, and there's a lot to learn from farmers about, you know, cows. And uh,
Mhm.
I'm not saying they don't bring a lot of value and knowledge, because they certainly do, but I think we do need to maybe apply that scientific lens and what we know about animal welfare that we didn't know when we were just basing things off of observation and tradition.
And you find that there's just a lot of questions that people don't ask. People are used to like answering certain questions. And it's always like, well, I just think about ventilation shutdown as like the easiest example. When you say like, hey, actually, we shouldn't be legitimizing ventilation shutdown. They're like, well, what are they supposed to do? And it's like, well, there are other methods, but even if there were none, the AVMA doesn't have to legitimize ventilation shutdown.
Mm-hmm.
What are the incentives in place that have allowed ventilation shutdown to take place and become a thing? Well, we've all the things. We've made these poultry facilities too big that make it difficult to use other methods. We then bail them out. And, we don't look at the whole picture.
Right.
I found that a lot in veterinary medicine. I was kind of like the one compliment that I got on my rotations was like I was always applying multiple things that I learned from a variety of different places to my cases, whereas most people are like very narrowly focused. Oh, like I'm on internal medicine, so I'm only thinking about this sort of thing. Whereas I was like, well, what about this thing I learned over here and this thing I learned over here, and which could be annoying to people. Why are we doing it this way when the cow people do it this way? Like, because we're on the dog rotation right now, cow rotation, Well, like, why don't the dog people do it like the cow people do? I'm just, which, makes it hard for people when we tend to reward people who fit into the box really well. And we're just kind of trained to solve the problem before us and not ask whether this is a problem that needs to exist in the first place, which is something we get into a lot of.
But people will bring that up. I love hearing from professors when, they're talking about, I have one professor in particular who teaches ophthalmology, and she is constantly like, don't breed this animal if they have the disease. Don't, and I think we need more of that. I think some of our professors are like, I mean, it might be controversial, but I don't think we should make more Frenchies. And it's like, no, let's all stand up and say they don't pass an OFA because they are not right in the face. Like, they cannot be deemed healthy. They're not born healthy. Anyway.
And then one day we'll be able to say, like, hey, you shouldn't breed pigs like this with this high rates of lameness just because they produce more meat or whatever. And maybe we'll apply it to farmed animals, but we don't do that yet, really. So I don't want to keep you all too long. And I know we haven't gotten to like the nitty gritty of what we're out here to do. Are you down to stay a few minutes, or do you have to go?
No, I can stay. Yeah.
So Veterinarians United, we are starting a website, veterinariansunited.org. Our goal is to demystify activism and make it very easy and accessible and teach people how to do activist things, like build a website, like make graphics, like make social media posts.
How to talk to people, how to like write an email that is going to get you the meeting and not make someone press delete, how to bring things up to people in power in a way that is not catering to them but gets you a seat at the table.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which is all very important stuff, because I have made lots of mistakes in that in my life. So that's what we hope to do. And I don't know where we want to start, what our first project should be. Maybe we can use this moment to decide next meeting, what are going to be our plans and priorities, because Lorea is the planner and I tend to just like jump forward and do things, just like I did with this live stream. I'm like, we're doing this now, Lorea. And she's like, we don't have a plan. I'm like, no, we're just.
But that's the whole thing, is you get to watch us plan and do, because if you just plan and have no action, then that doesn't end up well. And if you just act without any plan, then maybe you get a lot done, but there's
a lot of consequences. I can speak.
some things that we could maybe avoid that, or learn from. So yeah, we're trying to combine those. And I mean, I guess building a website is a good place to start. So that's something we should do in the near future. And then I guess picking an action item. We've talked about a lot of different things today, but yeah, picking something that we want to tackle and do.
Yeah. Do we want to? I kind of would love to write letters to every single vet school describing the problems with their curriculum and why they should change it. And hopefully we will, in 5 years, the whole veterinary curriculum will be drastically changed, and we'll have set plans for how people can move away from certain practices and really help them along. So I think it starts by addressing one school, writing a letter to one school, getting veterinarians and vet students to sign on to that letter and say like, hey, yeah, this makes sense. This particular class shouldn't be run like this anymore. Let's change it to this. And here's the scientific evidence why that should be done. and with a lot of empathy for the researchers, because I know it hurts to like hear from outsiders that you're doing something wrong and that there's a better way. When you've dedicated your career to this, you've thought about this, and now these people who haven't lived your life are from the outside are telling you to change, like that's totally disrespectful.
Yeah.
And I think we got to do it in a respectful way and understand where they're coming from, and we're here to help and not judge them at all, because they have dedicated their lives to helping students learn and not being well rewarded for it financially by any means. So I think
Yeah,
we
I
have to
think that's a
encourage them.
great place to start is, I mean, it could be a letter specifically to a school, or it could be a general letter that then can go to any school that, we could start with terminal labs, and we might get more people to sign on if it's a general, maybe we list all the schools, because I know you have information on all the schools, all the public universities, I should say, in the US that have terminal labs. If we could share that and list all the schools, then students who went to those schools might be more invested than if we're just focusing on one school in one state that is far away from you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Just having a generic letter, and I think a generic letter, and then maybe we can focus on specific schools too, and have like maybe teams of people who are passionate about one particular school or the other dive into the more specific practices at that school, and why they need to change.
Especially if we can get alumni from the different schools, that would be great. If we can get students, I'm happy to do everything that I can with my school and continue having the conversations that I've been having, and hopefully serve as a good example in how, like, talking to the admin and talking to professors is not as scary as it seems. I know from students that I've talked to that there's a lot of fear about speaking out. And I mean, some of it is very legitimate. Like, look at what's happened to you over the years for speaking out, and all the other whistleblowers, and, in all different fields. But I think that it's a little different as a student, because you are the one that's paying the bill, and we're so focused on the customer. And I've seen this kind of shift as a teacher, and how parents have a lot more say in what goes on in the classroom than they did, even when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I think that college students have more of a say, this time around than even back when I was doing my undergrad 10 years ago. And I think that I don't think they're going to be as quick to try to kick you out. And I'm so glad that Erin shared her story, because she didn't get kicked out of school. She did graduate. She is an amazing veterinarian.
Yeah.
And so I think that,
and there's a lot of stories like that, and maybe we can invite every week, have one person like an Erin come on and like share your story, because there are so many. And I'm meaning to talk to so many of them. So if we have a set date every week, you can join us here at this time, and we'll talk to somebody new. And if you are that person who wants to share their story, like, reach out, and people can email me at info@ourhonor.org. And if you want to join our chat and come and be part of the activism that we're doing, and join the live stream and follow along with us and the things that we make and do, info@ourhonor.org, and we can add you to our Signal chat that we have too. So yeah. Any other things we should mention?
There's just an excellent comment here. Joyce says, I was about to suggest looking at systemic change in the vet curriculum with a focus on making the ethical choice the easy choice or the only choice. And I love that framework. Yeah.
Yeah. Where is that comment? Because I don't see it.
Yeah,
The wrong. Anyway,
it's in our StreamYard chat.
I'm still figuring out how this works. I just see a bunch of stuff from Sky, honestly. Oh, here's the private chat. Oh, okay, I see it. No, I'm learning how this thing works. Next time, we're going to have a beautiful background, I'm sure. We're going to have an intro. We're going to like schedule this thing on YouTube. But right now, I'm just figuring it out. So that's you'll figure it out along with us.
But that's the beauty of it, is you get to see from the ground up how to make stuff happen, and you'll get to see how it can be demystified and how it doesn't have to be super scary.
Right now we're on StreamYard, the StreamYard app, which I just figured out how to stream to all of my platforms. So that's one demystification there. And we're going to use Squarespace to build our website and Canva. And yeah. So shall we sign off and end it now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Right.
Thanks again, Erin.
Bye, y'all. See y'all next week.
Bye.